But joining me is Ryan Kennedy. He is the Chief of Operations for Florida Citizens Alliance, and we're going to talk about AI in schools, technology. In fact, this whole program, artificial intelligence, its growing impact into almost every aspect of our life, from work, school, home, and then some. And we're also going to have a biblical view of immigration, a deep dive into that. That'll be for our faith focus today. But for right now, I want to welcome Mr. Ryan Kennedy to the program. Ryan, it's great to see you. Thanks for being on the program.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me on.
While we've got your name and credentials on the screen, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do with Florida Citizens Alliance, and maybe even how you came to that group.
Yeah. So I am the Chief of Operations at the Florida Citizens Alliance. We are a 501c3 and C4, and our whole goal and focus is to improve student education in Florida and protect children. So we do that through three pillars. One is our legislative pillar, which is primarily how we do a lot of our work. It is through going through change, getting policy changes in Tallahassee and at the local level. And the other two pillars are our community focus. So we have Kids First teams in 20 plus counties in Florida. So those are our local grassroots organizations. And then lastly is our solutions pillar, which is we help parents start micro schools. So those are one-room schoolhouses, homeschool co-ops, those sorts of things. That is what our organization does. I started actually working at the organization in 2018 as an intern in college. I worked there then part-time after college and started officially full-time 3 years ago now. And I started in the policy role, heading up the policy department in Tallahassee. So that's really what I have my experience in, is kind of dealing with the legislative body, advocating for policy and those sorts of things. I'm the Chief of Operations now, and so I oversee the organization's day-to-day operations, executing the budget that's set out by the board and those sorts of matters. So I oversee the whole team of everything I just listed out. And I still obviously have a heavy influence on the legislative process, and I still go up to Tallahassee from time to time.
Wow, that's incredible. Let's set up the scene. I'm going to put this on the screen. This is a recent article here, which is on the Florida Citizens Alliance website. goflca.org is the website, goflca.org. But parents, not machines, must raise Florida's children. I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a moment. A couple of things, just basically, to set the scene. Teen mental health. According to the CDC, and Ryan, I always use, I always try to use government numbers, because if they'll admit to it, it's usually worse than what they'll admit to. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So we'll start with this. CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey of 2023, 39.7% of high school students reported persistent sadness and hopelessness. 52.6% of girls specifically reported the same. Teens are almost constantly online. Pew reports nearly half of U.S. teens say they're online almost all day long, and that means from when they get up to after they go to bed. Younger kids' screen time, Common Sense Media says kids 0 to 8 years old average 2 hours, 27 minutes a day, and that's caregiver reported, so that's a self-reported survey. Phone notification, Common Sense also found that over half of teen participants received 237 plus notifications a day. Teens, 237 plus. When I was a kid, I was lucky if I got one phone call from my best friend, like in a month. Anyway, but that was a long time ago in the land of wizards and trolls, and the world was black and white. But anyway, lastly, social media safety warning. The U.S. Surgeon General said that we cannot conclude, however, that social media is sufficiently safe for kids and adolescents, and calls for risk mitigation. So, of course, you are hitting this head on here in your article. Your headline is blunt: parents, not machines. What is the core threat? Is it AI replacing parents? And is that on an emotional, a moral, a practical, spiritual level? Take us to the bottom floor here.
Yeah. So essentially, the reason that I chose that title was really because you're right. There is this replacement going on. A lot of these tech companies, the ones behind AI, they really want you to use AI for just about everything in your daily life. Any kind of question you got, any sort of concern you have, they want you to use that the AI technology, those chatbots. And in particular, and you mentioned some of those statistics up front, but one that I always like to lead with is 1/3 of those 25 and under would rather talk to children or would rather talk to AI than about a serious issue than a human. That includes their peers. So you're talking about minors that would rather 1/3 of them would rather talk to AI about a serious issue like relationships or things related to like you said, depression, mental health with an AI chatbot than a human. That's concerning. That's a lot of children. ChatGPT, the biggest AI provider, they self-report that they have 800 million users worldwide, and that was as of a few months ago. So it's probably even higher now. And they also self-report that about 75 to 80% of those are minors, are essentially that same age group, 25 and under. So you just know that children are using AI all the time, even if parents don't realize it. And our whole focus, one of the biggest things that we've tried to do as an organization is say parents need to raise their children. Parents need to have their rights. So parental rights is a big factor to that. But parents need to be in charge of their children's future. And we've done that through educating parents, but we've also done that through, again, the legislative process. And so that is the biggest risk that we see is AI being a replacement to parents. And that is concerning to us.
Do you see then AI, artificial intelligence, as more of an information problem, like the kids are getting bad answers, bad advice, so to speak, if you can call it advice, or is it more of a formation problem, more foundational, like habit, dependence, and attachment?
I think it's a little bit of both. So when it comes to AI, I think there are a couple of things. One is AI is a tool, and there can be a lot of good things that come out of AI. We are not saying get rid of AI completely. That is not our position. Our position simply is that parents should be in charge of whether or not their child has access to that and the kind of content that that child interacts with when it comes to AI. So when it comes to content, what we have seen is that AI has had a pretty decent hallucination rate. That's essentially its lying ability. AI as an algorithm is designed to essentially make stuff up in order to keep you engaged. It's very similar to social media in the sense that social media feeds the user content it wants to see based on your likes, based on how much time you spend on a particular post. It builds a profile. AI is very similar, and it's capturing all that information, all those questions you put into it, and then it's spitting out info. And what we've seen, and this was a little bit ago now, so ChatGPT may have a different opinion on it, but ChatGPT, for example, was getting a lot of its info from Reddit. Reddit is, of course, it's all opinion. Now, there might be some truth that people are posting on Reddit, but it is in of itself a forum for debate. So if AI is getting that info from Reddit and that's what's being presented to a child, hypothetically, that's concerning. We think when it comes to children, especially in a school environment, they should be being taught facts, things that we know for certain primary source documents, those sorts of things. So that's really the two issues we see with AI.
You cite a poll in the article that a large share of young voters would grant AI sweeping authority over rights. Why do you think that instinct is rising? Where does that come from? And I got to follow up, but I was about to give you a double barrel question, but let's start with there. Why do you think that we're becoming more and more okay with giving up our rights, and in this case, particularly giving up our rights to AI?
Yeah. Well, I think two things. One is, and I'm a younger person, so I can be at fault of this a little bit, but I grew up in the age where personal computers were things, and everybody just had access to them in their home. And so that was my generation. I'm a millennial. But when you go to the younger and younger generations, now they've had experience with smartphones, having access to them all the time, and with social media. And so I think part of it is just they're so used to technology that it's just become a common thing, and so they trust it versus and like I said, I have conversations with Gen Z people, and there's divides over whether or not trusting technology versus not. I still remember distinctively times where I remember certain things like not streaming service, Blockbuster, for example. I remember that. And so there is a little bit of that generational divide. I think that's playing into a little bit, but it's also foundational too. I mean, we know that people, are not going to church. They're not participating, regardless even of Christianity. They're not participating in their religious and any kind of religion. They're becoming more secular. And I think that plays a role too, because if you don't have any grounding or foundation, then you're going to be more subject to interpreting things from trusted sources. And AI, again, for a reason, but it presents itself as knowing what it presents. And obviously, AI on its nuts and bolts, it's almost like a super search engine in a sense. But again, we know through statistics that children have a lot of, they have trouble discerning what is false from true. We know that via surveys and statistics and studies. So that's why AI becomes very dangerous for children, is because if they don't have a sense for what's right and what's wrong, they don't have any kind of a moral foundation, it's going to become very difficult for that child to know how to engage with that content.
I would even add, it's in the West, whether you're a child or an adult, it becomes difficult to know what's real and what's true. And I would just cite the fact that we have a decent portion of the American electorate that's not sure what a man or a woman is. When you get to that point, you'll believe anything, and especially then allow your kids to believe anything. I want to move on to some policy in Florida. Florida's AI Bill of Rights just came out, and there has been some pushback from the right, saying that it opens the doors to more techno surveillance. The proposals include parental control language in transparency, that is, knowing whether you're talking to a bot, et cetera, et cetera. What elements do you think are non-negotiable for child protection? And then in that, is a policy, a legislative bill, is that really the way we should do it? Or should we be educating parents and not open the door to some of that AI tech surveillance? While, when we would perceive the good guys having it, we'd say they'll do it for good things, but we know the good guys aren't always going to be in office, and they will use the same tools for evil. So where do you fall on that? And what elements are non-negotiable for child protection?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things to start with. One is, currently in Florida, and really federally for that matter, there really isn't any sort of standing AI regulatory process. AI is very new and it's growing very quickly. It's exponentially growing, actually. And so there is no really standard out there. There's a few things online when it comes to kids federally, but for the most part, especially within Florida, when it comes to AI, there's nothing. So what we've advocated for is there needs to be a floor, a certain set of standards, guardrails put in place to protect those children to start with, especially when it comes to in schools. We know school districts are already implementing AI into them. They're allowing kids to access AI with their Chromebooks, tablets, those sorts of things. So it's already happening. And so that's why we think there needs to be something. Now, to your point, we do need to educate parents and let them know what the dangers are and what the good is, and then allow parents to kind of have that say over it. However, to the point of protections and standards, what's non-negotiable? One is, first off, parents need to have a say whether or not their child can use it in the first place. That's very important. A child should not be able to go on AI, create an account, use AI without parents approving that first. That's the first thing. Second thing is making sure there's strong data privacy. As you mentioned, there are concerns about data collection and those sorts of things from those on the right of the aisle, and I can totally sympathize with those arguments, and that's why we need strong data protection. We need to make sure that data is protected. When it comes to kids in schools, that data should not even be leaving the hands of the school district. And in fact, really, parents need to know what data is being collected first. That's one of the things too that we recommend is parents need to know, okay, what kind of data is being collected on my child if they use AI, and essentially like a form of consent for that, informed consent. And then last is when it comes to, and this is particularly in schools, but is making sure that if it is used in schools, that it follows all of our state standards, that it has to teach the truth, it has to have a Western civilizational worldview. Those are the sorts of things that we have been advocating for when it's used in a school environment. But even outside of it, when it comes to general chatbot AI use by children, we've advocated for that chatbots should be non-humanistic in nature, meaning that and we've put together a bill on this, but it's a list of certain things that AI can't build those relationships with children. That's really what we're trying to avoid.
You warn that when big tech writes the rules, families rarely come first. And I wonder from an accountability standpoint, because we can put these protections in place, but what's the teeth behind them? What do you think meaningful accountability would look like when it comes to these protections? Are there private rights of action maybe that need to be included, fines, maybe data minimization mandates, things of that nature, or maybe default like off companion features that are for minors? What does some of that accountability look like? What would you see it being?
Yeah. So one of the first things accountability, when it comes to accountability, is we do encourage private cause of action, meaning parents or users can take in state court in this case, but take the tech companies to court over violations of the law that we would put in place. That's something we've advocated for and we think is important. Second factor is there needs to be some sort of overview by the state. And in this case, we've argued the Attorney General's office to have some kind of oversight capacity to make sure that everything's being followed, and they can bring, of course, a fine or a lawsuit if need be against these tech companies for violation. And in particular, one of the things that I would mention is what we've been advocating for is really targeted at children. One of the things, and you may bring this up later, but is President Trump's executive order. But we're really trying to target and protect children here, and that's what our primary focus is on when it comes to AI. I mean, when it comes to adults, they obviously they can choose to do what they want to do with AI, but when it comes to children, that's a little bit of a different scenario. So,
you mentioned also real world tragedies, and as we've been talking about, and as we know, well, everyone is impressionable to a degree, but our kids, our adolescents, much more so. And we see really what I'd call demonic ideologies being pushed on our children as young as preschool today, without turning this into a bunch of fear porn. All right, what categories of harm do you think are most urgent if we don't rein in the influence of AI on our kids? Is grooming a problem? Is self-harm an issue? Is particularly self-harm encouragement? We've read stories about kids where the AI chatbot has encouraged them to harm themselves. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's sexual content, pornography that comes through there. Maybe it's ideological manipulation. What do you think are the most urgent dangers that we want to stave off here right at the beginning?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you kind of touched on a lot of those are issues that we've seen. We have seen stories and we know cases of all those things happening. I think that the biggest concern in the short run is really it is twofold. One is grooming. I can definitely tell you that that's really important. And the other one is just ideological manipulation, because not necessarily that these tech companies are purposely trying to do that, as much as it is AI can be used for that purpose. AI right now is very much set up in a way that the user inputs what, and then it gives you what the user asks for. And so, there are some AI companies that are doing the right things, that are putting in place internally protections to make sure children can access explicit materials if they ask for it, or they can't ask how to do certain things that they know would be used to essentially violate the law, hypothetically. But again, that's only some of the companies. We believe all companies should do that. One example that I'll bring up to kind of bring home the point, and it wasn't in Florida, but it was in another state, is a minor actually used AI to essentially create fake images of their classmates. And all they did was they put a picture of their classmates into a system, and then it created the fake image. And it was sexual in nature. And so that person is now, that minor is now being charged for that crime. So that's one of our biggest concerns, honestly, is AI being used to essentially help in crime activities. And as we know that there are obviously people that are going to want to use that to target our kids. So that's a concern.
All right, as we get ready to land the plane here, and again, Ryan, I appreciate your time, Ryan Kennedy, with us. How do we now turn this into some practical action, look away from the legislative operations and into homes? What's a simple framework that maybe parents, guardians can use if they suspect their child is beginning to use AI for, as a counselor, as a mentor, as a teacher, that kind of thing? What would you encourage parents to be looking for? And are there tools available, or what tools are available that you would suggest maybe parents and guardians might look into?
Yeah. Well, what I will say first off is when it comes to using, and I advocate for this, we advocate for this with all technology, but is of course be involved with your child when they're using technology, especially at first. Show them the right ways to use it. Don't let them just do it on their own. That's a big one. Children, and statistics show this, that children are getting access to explicit content at early ages because they stumble onto it. They're not per se looking for it. They just happen to stumble onto it. And so parents, be involved at first. The other aspect is, again, trusted AI sources. There are some good AI companies that are developing, who are developing content, especially ones related to church-based, Christian themes. I know Glenn Beck, I think, is developing one. So there's just some different ones out there that are good, that are being developed, that are good. Do your own research, parents, before you let your child use it. And then lastly, I think the most important thing is think about when your child gets access to AI, especially at the younger ages. We know statistically that the younger a person starts using technology, and they're using it kind of in replacement to thinking, it actually does have an impact on that development of those critical thinking skills. We know this with other forms of technology. So just think about, age, when we use it, when you allow your child to use it, what they use it for, and then obviously what they're actually interacting with on there.
Ryan Kennedy, he is the Chief Operations Officer, or Chief of Operations, Florida Citizens Alliance. What is coming up? Where are you in the line of legislation? What's next in terms of these protections that you're working on immediately?
Yep. So right now in Florida, we are in our legislative process. You mentioned AI Bill of Rights. That's kind of the biggest one out there that we're working on, trying to get some good amendments to, hoping that a good foundation is done by passing that bill. However, we are planning on doing some AI symposiums. We did some last year across the different parts of Florida. We are in the process of planning one in the Orlando area. So that would be something that go to our website, watch for our AI symposiums. Those are a chance for you to interact with our team and to interact with a group of panelists that are experts on this topic. And we really want it to be focused on parents to essentially get the information on AI.
Yeah, and I would add too, as a parent and as somebody who also uses AI, and it's part of work life now, and learning how to use it. It's different than just Google searching, and so the more you learn and understand how to use AI, the better you'll be able to protect yourself and your kids if you can. So parents, take proactive action and learn that skill. Ryan Kennedy, again, Florida Citizens Alliance. The website is goflca.org. That is all the letters, goflca.org. You can find out what they're doing, see Ryan's work, as well as many others. Ryan, thank you for being on the program, and we look forward to having you back on as this story unfolds.